Hi guys! May is ending and that means it's time for me to wrap up all of my reading from this month and actually also one from the end of April that I didn't put in my last wrap up because I uploaded that video before I finished this book, even though that there was still more days in April and I ended up finishing another book in April. So I'm gonna go with that book first. That was The Book of Speculation by Erika Swyler. This is an adult magical realism-ish book. It's a family saga following carnival mermaids who all end up drowning. It's really creepy and atmospheric, and this whole carnival setting and being out in, I think it was the Pacific Northwest or New England. It might have been New England, out on the coast on the water. And it was really well done for that. It felt really chilly and dark and eerie, but otherwise it read like a debut. It is a debut from 2015, I think, and you can definitely tell from the writing. The storytelling is a little bit clunky and at times it sounds almost pretentious. The plot was interesting, but I would have liked to have more explanation. It felt like there were some things that got glossed over or never explained, and I don't know, it might just be the genre this is, because I think it's closer to like a mystery thriller kind of genre, which I don't normally read. So maybe that's just how it is, or maybe it's another flaw of being a debut. But I feel like parts of it weren't fully fleshed out, especially with like the characters. They were all very unlikable, but also part of that could be because you didn't spend much time with them, so you didn't really get to know them or their motivations. I also found that certain plot points could have used a little more subtlety in their telling. It was kind of really obvious what the author was going for in certain parts. So I think the writing could use a little more work, but I think it really nailed the atmosphere. It was very dark and mystical and a really interesting read. Just be aware if you plan to read this that the storytelling and the character development are not the best. Then in actual May, I started the Asian Readathon and I did end up completing all of my challenges. I had 2 books that I ended up DNFing, but I still was able to meet all the challenges. And I have a reading vlog where I basically complete all of the challenges because the books that I ended up picking up after were the ones that I DNF'd. So if you want to see my full thoughts on all of these books, you can check that, but I'll quickly go over them here as well. The first book I read was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this is about a middle-aged woman who's been working in a convenience store for 18 years and she doesn't really understand what it means to be normal. Like, for example, she finds a dead bird on the sidewalk as a kid and all of the other kids around her are super sad. The parents are really sad and they want to bury the bird. And instead she thinks that, oh, my father likes to eat bird. Why don't we bring it home and cook it? Why would we bury it? So it's really very interesting. It's a weird take on humanity and society and what it means to be normal and society's expectations, especially for single women. It was definitely a thought-provoking read and it's very short, so I would recommend it. And that book completed the challenge for being written by an Asian author and being translated from the native language. And then I read 2 short manga that were not part of the Asian Readathon. They were Ganbare Nakamura-kun by Syundei and Yumekoi by Anashin. These are both 1-volume series and they're both really cute and adorable. Ganbare Nakamura-kun is about a boy who's trying to become friends with his crush, and that's as far as it goes. It's super innocent and super sweet and adorable. And Yumekoi is 4 short stories about falling in love. I don't really remember them that well. It was a little bit forgettable, but I like Anashin's art style and I am always a sucker for cute little love stories. The next book I read for the Asian Readathon was The Black Tides of Heaven by J.Y. Yang. This is a novella that's part of the Tensort series. It's the first book in the Tensort series, but I don't think the books follow a continual storyline. I think they're more different stories within the same world. This book is about 2 twins who are the children of the Protector, who is a ruthless ruler in this world, and it follows their lives as they grow up and all of the political intrigue and self-reflection that they go through. It's told in these short little segments of different snippets of their life, so it starts, I think, before they're born, and then it does a little section when they're like 8 years old, and then it'll skip to like when they're 17 or something. And that sort of storytelling style can be a bit of an issue for me, partially because I don't feel like I spent a lot of time with the characters and I didn't really get to know them and I didn't really understand their motivations because I just wasn't in their head for very long. It also makes the plot a little more disjointed because you have these huge time gaps in between every segment, but I really loved the world. It was so incredible and detailed and full of culture that I just want to know everything about, and I wish we'd gotten more in this book. So I'm definitely interested in reading the next books in the series. I think they're up to 5 now, I'm not sure. But I am definitely looking forward to learning more about this world and exploring more of this world. I want to know about the magic system. I want to know the politics. I want to know society and all the different people growing up in it. There's so much that's interesting that I just didn't get enough of in this novella. But I'd still definitely recommend it. It has really interesting representation for non-binary characters. That's why this book satisfies the intersectional prompt for the Asian Readathon. These children are born genderless, and then whenever they feel like they know who they are, they decide which gender they want to be. So I thought it was definitely an interesting addition and just shows the breadth of the development in this world and how unique it is being Asian inspired and non-binary and everything, and I want more. For the graphic novel challenge, I read My Giant Nerd Boyfriend, which is a webcomic from Malaysia, and it's so cute. It's these little slice of life snippets about a girl and her boyfriend and their sort of dorky little moments and love story, and it's just so adorable and sweet, and I relate to it so much, having a giant nerd boyfriend myself and being very short myself. There is a foot difference between us, and it's really funny to see how it's depicted in this webcomic. The art is really cute, and I think the webcomic is done really well. I have been keeping up with it since reading it, so I've been reading all of the new releases that come out. I think she posts 3 times a week, but it's really good and I would definitely recommend it. I read the group book, which was 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, edited by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman, and I really loved this book. I think I liked it more than most people did, at least from what I could tell in the live stream that happened. But I don't know if it's just because I was listening to it, and like fairy tales are meant to be listened to. They sound really whimsical and really nice to listen to. Or because I'm just a fairy tale freak. I love fairy tales, especially ones that I have never heard before and I don't know anything about. I love learning new fairy tales, and they were all Asian, which was just great. I didn't say. This book is a collection of short stories that were retellings of Asian fairy tales from different ethnicities and different countries, and I think it was very good. Some people were saying that there's like differences in writing skills and storytelling skills between the different stories, which obviously they're different authors. There's going to be differences in their writing and not all of them are going to hit for everyone. But I found that I enjoyed more than I didn't. There were only really a couple that I didn't really get along with, and the rest I thought were either good or very good. I love how at the end of the story there's a section where the author sort of tells you the reason for choosing that story and what the original story was. I think it definitely gave me a better appreciation for each story because I wasn't familiar with any of these fairy tales before, and I don't think you can fully appreciate a retelling if you don't know what the original is. So I really liked that part. I liked how they all had this sort of element of fantasy or sci-fi, which is my genre, so I enjoyed seeing it mixed with the fairy tale elements. And maybe that's why this book was also so good for me. I don't know. I just know that I am considering buying a physical copy, and I don't normally buy books, so that's saying something that I want to own it. I really liked it. And I'm super interested in finding more Asian fairy tales. If you have any recommendations for fairy tale collections at all, please let me know. I would be very grateful. Next, I picked up Empress Orchid by Anchee. This is about the last Empress of China and how she sort of rose to her power from being a peasant girl. I am super interested in the history of this period. I know basically nothing about China at all, and I would like to change that, so I thought this would be a good place to start, but the writing is terrible. It's supposed to be a first-person perspective of this woman who becomes the last empress, And it's just so flat and boring. There's super detailed descriptions about like rituals and the appearance of things. So like exactly how a room is set up and what sort of painting is on this random vase in the middle of the table. It's really very detailed, and it's like I'm reading a textbook. And when you go through the story of what these characters are going through, it feels the same way. It's like I'm reading a textbook and I'm just seeing these things that happen to this person instead of being in the perspective of this person and seeing how she specifically feels about everything. It doesn't feel sincere at all. The occasional thoughts that she has, which are supposed to justify her actions, I guess, feel super fake. And it's like someone's just rewritten a textbook and decided to make every sentence start with I. There's very little dialogue, and pretty much all of it is telling instead of showing. Plus, there's the weird thing with the timeline where she's sort of telling this story as an older woman at the end of her life, and there are random points when she'll jump forward in time and be like, oh, later on I did this thing with this person who showed up now, and then go back to the original timeline, and they just feel really odd and out of nowhere, and like you could have waited until we were actually in that timeline to say that, instead of trying to like sort of lay the groundwork and justify her motivations that sort of, I guess, were said to have stemmed from her actions in the beginning. I don't know, it was just really messy, and it made something that I was interested in. I'm interested in the history, I would like to know the history, but the way that it's told is not quite a history book and not a novel, so it's in this weird space that made it really dry and really hard to get through. And I ended up DNFing it at like 30%. I was reading reviews and they said that the first part is the most interesting part and then it gets worse from there, and I was like, I hated the first part, so what's the ending gonna be like? And I was not ready to put up with that, so I didn't finish it, and it's really sad because I want to know about this period. If you have recommendations for anything that will teach me about this period or any period of China, Chinese history, any sort of novels or even textbooks, like I feel like reading a textbook would be better than reading this. So I'm still really interested in it, but this book is just not going to work for me. I don't recommend it at all. Next, I picked up Man Tiger by Eka Kurniawan. I also DNF'd this book at 25%. It's an Indonesian book about a boy who murders someone, and it sort of goes through the whole village's reactions to it, and they're kind of trying to figure out why this boy who seems so innocent and nice ended up brutally murdering this man. And it sort of leans on magical realism, and I just didn't really get into it. There are a lot of characters and it jumps to a lot of different point of views because you're going through like this whole village and all the people in this village. So it gets a little bit hard to connect with the story because you're not staying in one person's mind the whole time. But also there was nothing really compelling for me. I think this is something that you definitely read to get a glimpse at the culture in Indonesia and at literature, but it's not something that I was super interested in at this moment, at least, so I put it down after 25%. I'm sure it's really good, but I just didn't have any interest in it. And those two books that I DNF'd, I was going to use for my translated work, but I realized that Convenience Store Woman is my translated work, so I was going for the wrong prompt in the first place. It's fine. Everything's covered. I did it. So then the next book I read was Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the second book in the Rhaenyra Revelations. I don't like how it's Rhaenyra. It doesn't look like it's supposed to be pronounced Rhaenyra. It looks like Ruria, but whatever. Again, this is two books that were combined into one book, so it was book 3 and book 4. Book 3 was fine for me. It's still cheesy, and Arista's love life was definitely predictable and kind of unnecessary, I think. I found that there were definitely some character shifts where like Saldor was acting completely differently than how he was in the first book, but that could be justified by what happened in the first book, but at the same time it's still really jarring and really weird, and I don't think it would have happened to the extent that it did. And then there was another character, Wyatt, who is in book 4 and was also in book 1, and he did like a complete shift, like he was a different character. I don't know. So that was weird, but it was definitely eclipsed by how much I hated the 4th book in general. It was so bad. It was such a mess. I personally hate ship books, so that already had something going against it. Book 4 is a ship book completely through and through, and I despise it. I hate ship jargon because I don't know what's happening and it annoys me to no end. And then there was all these different crew members that I couldn't keep straight because they didn't have their own personalities, and there were so many people getting mixed up, and then random places and random people were being introduced out of nowhere with no context and no previous knowledge of them whatsoever. And I was listening to it on audiobook and I was thinking, oh, maybe I just like suck at listening, which I do. I'm not an audio learner. I always have trouble listening and learning, but I was looking back at the physical text of it and it literally did just pop out of nowhere. I wasn't crazy. These things had no preface whatsoever, and there was like whole races of people who are suddenly introduced because they're going on this wild adventure and they end up in this exotic land, and there's all the indigenous people who are crazy and weird, and we have to go into the forest and deal with this like murderous huntsman like clan leader. I was so mad at the end of this book. It just made no sense. It's definitely not like the best written series. I mentioned before when I read what's the first one called? Theft of Swords. When I read that, it's not like written the best and the ideas aren't original at all. But I was still enjoying it, and it was nice to fall into this magical world that is definitely cozy and nothing unexpected really happens. But then we get thrown into this whole mess, and I'm like, why was this here? You just wanted to write a pirate book and like stick it into the middle of your fantasy series. I don't get it. It was awful and it was a mess, and I don't know what happened, and I still don't know what happened, but you know, I'm still gonna finish the last book. And then the last book I read this month, which I finished yesterday, is Taipan by James Clavell. This is about a British merchant in China and the founding of Hong Kong. It's a historical fiction full of power and intrigue and politics and society and culture and economics and spies and riddles, and it's really jam-packed and very fascinating. It goes a lot into the characters, and you get a glimpse of what the culture was like in the European population, but also in the Chinese population of people who were interacting with these barbarians that were coming to trade with China. It's very dark and gruesome. The characters are definitely unlikable, and everything feels really high stakes. My issues with this book is that it's a ship book, and yes, I hate ship books. So there was a lot of jargon and a lot of things happening on the ship that I just don't know anything about. I didn't really read it that closely. I knew it was going to be full of ships because that's also how Shogun was, which I read 2 years ago from this author. So it didn't really bother me that much because I was prepared for it, and I was prepared to just not understand half of what's happening. But also there were these interactions with the local Chinese, and the conversations were in this broken English that was very hard to understand, especially over audio, which I listened to most of this book on audio, but I don't really mind. I thought the cultural insights were really interesting, and it definitely gave me a history lesson that I did not get from Empress Orchid, or I did, but in a more palatable way in this book. So I didn't particularly like it, but I didn't dislike it either. I'm just kind of meh. If you like historical fiction, or if you're interested in this time period in China and Hong Kong and British merchants and opium and tea and everything, I'd say this is a good book. But otherwise, you can pass on it. It's very dense, and it's definitely geared for a specific set of needs. And that's everything I read in May. I definitely had a scattered reading month. I read a lot of things that I'm not used to reading, with like classic literature and historical fiction, and then a few fantasy sprinkled in here and there. But overall, it was definitely an outside of my comfort zone kind of month, and I actually really enjoyed it. I loved getting to explore all of this different Asian literature that has been on my list to read for a while, but I have just never gotten to, and I probably wouldn't have gotten to for I don't know, years maybe, so I'm really happy I was pushed to read them now. And I've loved watching all the videos that are going up and getting even more recommendations for amazing Asian books. And getting reminded that there was a bunch of fantasy books that I still haven't read that I've been meaning to read, like Jade City and Poppy War, that I completely forgot about for some reason, but I will be getting to those in time. City of Brass, all of those I definitely need to get to in the future. But thank you to Syundei for making this readathon. I definitely had a great time doing it, and let me know how your Asian readathon went. I will see you later. Bye.